Learning new concepts can be really difficult. Mastering new topics can be super time-consuming, and actually remembering what you've learned and mastered can sometimes feel impossible. Welcome to Park Notes. I'm Parker Settecase, and I spent 11 semesters in graduate school trying to learn, master, and remember new concepts, ideas, information, and all sorts of theories. I earned 3 master's degrees, one in theological studies, one in systematic theology, and one in the philosophy of religion. Lots of abstruse metaphysical theorizing, lots of really weird words, obscure last names, and crazy theories. But over the course of my graduate studies, I learned a couple different tips and tricks to help me learn new concepts and master them, and how to store information so that I can continue to keep what I've already learned. Now, I also recently read Cal Newport's How to Become a Straight A Student, and I found that he uses some of the same tools that I used to be successful in graduate school. Now, on the one hand, that felt pretty good. Seems like I was on the right track. But on the other hand, that kind of sucks because I could have read this before my undergrad, and I could have saved myself a lot of time and energy not reinventing this wheel. So in this video, I want to share 2 helpful tips for learning, mastering, and actually remembering the material that you're studying. Now, if you're currently a student, this is going to be super helpful for you. But even if you're not a student, you can definitely use these tips in your own self-study, because formal schooling is just the start of your education anyways. That's why we have a commencement at the end of your formal education. Commencement means begin, so now we have the tools and we are ready to begin our lifelong education. So if you're a student, that's cool. If you're not a student, that's cool. Whoever you are, I think you'll benefit from the tips in this video. Okay, so first things first, like I said, I recently read Cal Newport's How to Become a Straight A Student. This book's actually getting a little bit old. He wrote it back in 2007, and I think he wrote it as a graduate student. But he interviewed a bunch of undergrad students who were straight A students themselves, and he asked them very specific questions in order to glean out their best study habits. Then he collated them all and put them in a book. So I really like this book. I don't agree with everything he says in here, and I'm sure he wouldn't agree with everything he said in here. It's been a long time. But when it comes to studying, Cal Newport's the man. So I do highly recommend you grab this book and just eat the meat and spit the bones. I think any current student or future student or autodidact will find something in this book to make it worth the read. But if you're interested in these kinds of nonfiction books, then you need to check out the sponsor for this video, Shortform. Shortform makes the world's best guides to nonfiction books. They offer amazing, detailed, supercharged book summaries. They're super detailed, so you get the book's key points at a deep level. They also have interactive exercises to help you apply the ideas you just learned so that you don't forget them. And they add smart insights like connecting what one author thinks about another author, so you end up understanding the ideas at a super deep level and building awesome connections between ideas. With Shortform, you can learn a book at different levels. For a 10-minute overview, check out the 1-page summary. And then if you want to go deeper, you can read the full guide. Shortform actually helped me make this very video. I pulled up the 1-page summary of How to Become a Straight A Student because I had read this book earlier in the year and I wanted a refresher on the overview of the book. And for many of their books, Shortform has an audio version, so I went on to listen to the full 40-minute guide as I was driving. So if you're short on time, use Shortform to check out the key ideas and decide if you want to invest in reading the full book. So you got to check out Shortform for yourself. Go to shortform.com/Parker for a free trial and a 20% off discount. Okay, so big thanks to Shortform for sponsoring this video. Now let's get on with the 2 tips. This is a Park Notes video, and I'm pretty much obsessed with notebooks, so I also have 2 notebook methods that go with each tip. So here's an overview of where we're going. So tip number 1 is use the quiz and recall method, and tip number 2 is outline your essays. If you use these 2 methods, then you'll be able to acquire new concepts more readily, and you'll be able to master new topics more easily. But if you use compendiums and commonplace books to store that information, then you'll be able to recall that information for years to come. So let's jump in first with the quiz and recall method. So on page 105, Cal covers the quiz and recall method. He says whether it's philosophy or calculus, the most effective way to imprint a concept is to first review it and then try to explain it, unaided, in your own words. If you can close your eyes and articulate an argument from scratch, or stare at a blank sheet of paper and reproduce a solution without a mistake, then you have fully imprinted that concept. It's not going anywhere. The same is not true if you merely read over something. Passively reviewing a concept is not the same as actively producing it. Most students make the mistake of relying only on a passive review. They read and reread their notes and assignments and assume that the more they read, the more they will remember. But as Ryan from Dartmouth warns, simply reading it over doesn't work. You have to make the extra effort to get it into your head. Now that may sound like it's just a technique for mastering technical concepts and material, but Cal goes on to say that you can apply the quiz and recall method to non-technical course material as well. You just need to create your own study guide or practice quiz, come up with questions derived from the material you're trying to master, and then use active recall to try and answer those questions. Now this is like double dipping because you have to get deep into your material in order to abstract out questions for your own study guide. So in the process of doing that, you're already starting to metabolize those concepts. And then you're going to use active recall to try and answer those questions without looking at any of your notes. Now I absolutely love this method. In a lot of my graduate courses, my professors would give us a midterm, and they'd often give us a midterm study guide. Usually these would consist of 7 or 8 essay prompts, and then they'd whittle them down to like 4 or 5 that would actually be on the midterm itself. And they wouldn't tell us which prompts are going to be on the midterm, so we had to be prepared to answer most of them, if not all of them. So what I started doing was taking study guides for midterms or final exams. I would rewrite all the essay prompts in a notebook. I would briefly thumb through my course notes, as well as some of the primary text, just to refresh myself, and then I would sit down with a pen and try to answer the essay prompts by myself with nothing more than a pen and my mind. This is a really helpful method because it's brutally honest. You may think you understand the concepts and the course material, but when you're forced to sit down and try to actively produce the arguments or to actually form your own opinions about a particular topic, you come to find out exactly how much you know or don't know. So something that Cal doesn't mention in his book is putting those questions all in one spot, in your compendium of class notes. Now I think if you're going to go through the trouble of trying to learn these new concepts, then you better store them somewhere so you can go back and reflect on them. Why would you want to master a new idea and then just let it go? Especially if it's something you want to be an expert in. I got a master's degree in philosophy. I want to be a master of philosophy. Now I'd also like to go on and do a PhD in philosophy, but I don't want to lose what I've already gained. So this is one of my course notes compendiums. A compendium is a collection of concise but detailed information about a particular topic. It's usually meant to be comprehensive in scope and systematically presented. Now I know we often just call this a notebook, but I think it actually is a compendium. It's a concise collection of detailed information. It's systematically presented because your professors are systematically presenting topics, and they're meant to be comprehensive in scope in that your professor should be teaching you the whole scope of the topic they're teaching on. Now if you don't want to call your notebook where you store your lecture notes a compendium, that's fine, but I found it to be really helpful. But let's get back to active recall. So here I have my ontology midterm study guide from the ontology course that I took at Palm Beach Atlantic University with Dr. Paul Gould. This was back in October 2021. So this is super simple. I just copied the midterm essay prompts into my compendium, and then I used active recall to try to answer them right here in this notebook. This really helped me with this midterm. I did really well on it. But in my head, that would have been a waste if I only did well on a midterm and I didn't remember the stuff I was trying to master. But because I copied that into the notebook where I keep my lecture notes, I'm able to read this over and remember those concepts that I work so hard to learn and master. So for example, the first essay question is on abstracta. That's on abstract objects, things like numbers and the laws of logic. Maybe even universals like the perfect form of a triangle or the form of goodness, those kind of transcendentally type things. So the first essay prompt consists of 3 questions. List and discuss the standard understanding of the abstract concrete distinction. 2, what's the difference between expansive and austere Platonism? And 3, outline an argument for the existence of abstract objects. So if you would have asked me what expansive Platonism is before I sat down to make this video, I'm not sure that I would have been able to actively recall that for you. But thankfully, my former self wrote it down for me right here. And I was able to remind myself that expansive Platonism is an expansive view in that it includes things like soup recipes and computer programs in the realm of abstract objects. Now, with that in mind, I was able to remember that austere Platonism is the view that rejects consensual or created entities in the sphere of abstracta. So that's some weird philosophy stuff that may not be super important for you, but hopefully the lesson is. Active recall can help you master new concepts and get them deep into your psyche, and then keeping a record of your active recall in a compendium can help you dust off those old concepts so you don't lose what you've already gained. Now, for those of you who are not in school right now, this will require just a little bit more work because you don't have a professor who's making midterm prompts for you. But that's fine, you just make your own prompts for yourself. Let's say you're listening to a podcast on artificial intelligence and you want to master master new concepts like transformer neural nets. You may have to listen back to that podcast 3 or 4 times in order to take good notes on what the thinker is saying, and then abstract from those notes good questions to serve as your own active recall prompts. But all of that is a good thing. You're going to have to become a better active listener. You're going to have to get better at taking notes while listening, and you're going to end up knowing these concepts inside and out as you create questions for yourself and then answer those questions at a later time. Now, I think that might be an important tip in itself. Come up with prompts that you're going to answer in order to master concepts, but give yourself a little bit of time between generating those prompts and answering those prompts. Whether it's a night or a day or a week, give yourself a little bit of time so it's not as fresh in your mind, and you'll actually have to work hard to recall the information that you're trying to master. Now, I like actually writing down my active recall sessions. This serves as an objective test on what I know. I see the little amount of information I was able to add to certain prompts or the ones I had to leave blank, and then I can go back later and fill in more information, whether it's through active recall or by checking my notes. But on top of that, I have another record of that information right here in my notebook that I can use later. But some of you may benefit from just doing this out loud. Another option that Cal gives in the book is to do this orally, so just saying your answers out loud. Now, I do this as well. I do it by myself, so if you're listening outside of my study, you may think that I'm crazy just talking to myself, but I also practice active recall on my wife during our walks. This poor woman has to hear me download about austere Platonism and all sorts of other abstruse, weird metaphysical ideas. But actually teaching someone else about what you're learning is a great way to metabolize that information and make it your own. You have to put it in your own words, whether it's using pen and paper, whether it's just talking out loud to yourself, or whether it's talking to a spouse or a friend or any other captive audience. So that's tip number 1, create a quiz for yourself, practice active recall with someone else, by yourself, but I highly recommend you also record it in your compendium so you can go back and reflect on it later. Okay, so that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is make outlines for your essays and record those outlines in a manuscript commonplace book. So whereas tip number 1 had to deal with short answer essay prompts, tip number 2 has to do with writing longer papers or essays, or if you're not in school, then blog posts. Forcing yourself to write an essay about a new concept or topic or set of information is one of the best ways to help you learn. That's why so many professors make you do it. So if you're not in school, then you should make yourself do this. Maybe start your own Substack or WordPress or whatever blogging platform you like. Maybe you subject your Facebook or Instagram followers to longer essays. However you do it, actually sitting down and writing your thoughts out is a great way to force yourself to metabolize those concepts. Now, actually writing an essay can be a pretty daunting task. Cal says, when facing an essay question, don't just start writing and see what happens. This approach leads to rambling answers and missed concepts. Instead, your first step should be to jot down a quick outline. This might seem like a waste of time, but in truth, it can be invaluable. Now, creating outlines for my papers and essays during grad school was probably the best decision I made in all of grad school. Here I have 2 commonplace books where I wrote all the manuscripts and outlines for my papers during my 11 semesters of graduate school. Actually, writing the outline helped me get clear on my thoughts. I had to give myself an intro, body paragraphs, conclusion. I also had to get clear on my arguments and sub-arguments, show myself how I was going to defend and support the premises, make sure that the conclusion followed from the premises, make sure the form of the argument was valid and that the premises were true so that it was a sound argument, all that good stuff. I have a record of those in here. Now, I have grown at least a little bit as a philosopher and theologian, so when I look back in here, sometimes it's pretty cringy, but that's okay. I can see my progress. I can see that I've grown. Oh, wow, I used to think that was a good argument. That's crazy. At least I don't think that anymore. But sometimes I surprise myself. Wow, I can't believe I was thinking that back then. Or there's the history of this idea that I've been working on. I thought of that way back then. That's pretty cool. Now, like I said, these are commonplace books. So I also have lots and lots of quotes that I used in my essays that I can find back here in these notebooks. For those of you who are new to the channel who may not know what a commonplace book is, I have a commonplace book of commonplace book quotes to help us. According to Earl Havens, one of my favorite commonplace book thinkers and historians, in the strictest sense, the term commonplace book refers to a collection of well-known or personally meaningful textual excerpts organized under individual thematic headings. These passages, or sometimes simply the headings themselves, have historically been termed commonplaces. A commonplace book is a place where you collect quotations for a particular purpose. Now, on the popular level, this gets confused all the time. What a lot of people call a commonplace book is really a catch-all journal, a place to catch everything, your ideas and your favorite quotes and song lyrics and task lists. But That's a catch-all. That's not a commonplace book. I'm currently working on at least one more video where I will clarify this a little bit more. I guess it doesn't matter a whole ton, but technically a commonplace book is a place where you store quotations. So these are my manuscript commonplace books because I'm storing quotations and I'm also storing my thoughts about those quotations. I'm outlining my papers. I'm actually writing in the quotations that I'm going to use in those essays. I really like writing out the quotations by hand because it helps me actually get those quotes deep into my mind. If I thought they were valuable enough to include in my essay, then I want to be able to recall those from my friends and family at the appropriate time. It's super cool to be able to give someone a quote right when they need it. So writing them out in a manuscript commonplace book is a good way to help do that. So if you're currently in school, you probably have midterm papers and final papers that your professors have assigned. I highly recommend that you outline your papers and write your manuscripts in a dedicated notebook. You're going to put in a ton of work to writing those papers. All that information, all those quotations, all those thoughts about quotations, all the exegesis, all the hermeneutics, all the hard work that you're putting into those papers can serve you for the rest of your life. But instead, what often happens is that we write the paper and we forget everything or almost everything we just wrote about. That's really dumb. We need to stop doing that. If you're going to put in the hard work to write an essay, then make that process work for you and serve you in the future. So I wrote a lot of papers in grad school and I can't hold all that information and my thoughts about those concepts and information all in my head at the same time. But thankfully, I created a record for myself that I can look back on and help myself remember what I wrote about and how I thought about those topics. So if you're in school, you got to start doing this. You'll thank yourself later. And if you're not in school, you can do this as well. Like I said, start a blog or become more active on Reddit. Manuscript your thoughts out in a notebook before you go online and contribute your thoughts to a forum or to your blog. This process will help you get clear on what you actually think and why you think it. It can help you learn new concepts, master new information, and actually remember and recall what you learned. All right, so that's it. Those are 2 tips for mastering new information: the quiz and recall method and outlining your essays. I hope that's been helpful for you guys. If you made it this far into the video, then you are awesome. Leave me a notebook emoji in the comments so I know who the real ones are. If you like this video, then make sure to leave me a like. And if you have another way to master new concepts and information, then leave that in the comments. I always love hearing from you guys. All right, that's going to do it for now. I'll catch you guys next time.